But as you said, we went through quite a big strategic change in 2010, changed the way in which we use sport. Sport became just the conduit, the vehicle, the tool to go on to achieve something much more tangible. And that was kind of twofold, really. One was from a funding perspective and our funding strategy. We wanted to engage non-sports funders, and the door was closed to them. Lottery, Children Need, Common Relief, other big funders. We knew we had to use sport to achieve non-sports outcomes. And the other reason, more importantly, was consultation with hundreds of young people from inner city Birmingham. They were saying, it's great that we're playing sport. They might not have articulated it like this, but they were effectively saying we're just scratching the surface by participation. We've got lots of issues, lots of challenges. Youth unemployment's really high in Birmingham, got crime and social behavioural issues, educational attainment challenges. So they wanted more support, and we had to respond to that. And so we really started that process of changing our model in 2010.
From Coordinate Sports, it's The Drive Phase, a show about sports founders, leaders and experts and the stories behind their business journeys. Our guest in this episode is Tom Clarke-Forrest, founder and CEO of Sport for Life. Tom launched Sport for Life with the mission to tackle social issues through sport. Since launching over a decade ago, the charity has changed its delivery model and scale significantly. During this episode, Tom walks us through his journey and expands on his decision to move from a sport for sport's sake model to drive more impact with programs that give young people the opportunity to create a better future for themselves. We discuss Tom's inspiration for launching the charity and strategies for high performance, as well as his plans for the future. Enjoy the show.
Okay, really excited to welcome Tom Clarke-Forrest to the show today. He's founder and CEO of Sport for Life, the charity using sport as a tool to facilitate social good, focusing on meaningful and sustainable impact. Welcome to the show, Tom.
Hi, James. How you doing?
Good, mate. What I want to do is dive straight into a really meaningful experience for you, which would probably be, I know we've talked a couple of times, but probably be your visit to Brazil, right? And I think that might be the genesis of kind of your career so far and what we'll go on to talk about, which is Sport for Life. So how was that? So was it a gap year that you went out to Brazil and worked out there?
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, after a kind of really privileged and happy, healthy upbringing in Birmingham, when I finished secondary school before university, wanted to do something a little bit different, and opportunity came up to go on a kind of structured gap year to Brazil. And it was a real cultural experience. We were really immersed in a specific area. So I lived in Sao Paulo for 6-7 months.
Was this like in the favelas and everything out there?
So we were working in, the typical shanty towns, favelas in Sao Paulo, and lived just outside of that with a Brazilian family. So it was a real immersion in that culture, that experience. And sport and youth work was really central to what we did there. So it was probably my first real and meaningful and impactful experience of witnessing sport and sport as a vehicle and a tool, and how it can be used to work with young people as well as youth work more generally. And so I wouldn't say the idea of Sport for Life necessarily started in Brazil, because there was still 3 years of university ahead of me, but it certainly helped me in my grounding and witnessing the power of sport.
What was that like then? I guess massive culture shock if you just landed, maybe young guy, wet behind the ears. Maybe I don't know if you've been to Brazil before that or experienced anything like that. What was it like getting off the plane then, and kind of what did you find your face?
Yeah, weather was certainly different to start with, that's for sure. It was really fun. I think it was quite eye-opening how they kind of treated you and saw you as a kind of Westerner middle-class person from the UK. They almost put you on this pedestal, which I wasn't expecting, to be honest. And a lot of it is trying to break down those barriers. Just say, I'm just a guy just like you are. And yeah, it was a real bit of a culture shock as well, especially, going straight into the favelas and seeing the deprivation, seeing the disadvantage, seeing some of the struggles they're facing. But the young people we met, they were so positive. They love sport. Football was, they're football mad over there. And just taking a football into a favela was a universal language. And yeah, can't speak highly enough for the Brazilian people and the young people that we met.
I guess that's probably the synergy with hopefully that's the connecting factor in sports, bringing people together. If you put that back into your childhood, as you grew up, you said you felt like privileged upbringing, but in terms of sport, got that in common. And I guess, was it a competitive environment for you growing up in terms of your family, local community?
Yeah, definitely. Being so close to my older brother, only 18 months apart, playing a lot of sport, playing in the same teams, it was always very competitively. Annoyingly, he pretty much beat me at all sports, but that's the way it went. But
normally,
yeah, I think
normally with the close brothers, close in age older brother, you'd have a bit of
yeah.
a bit of unlicensed boxing probably thrown into the mix
Yeah,
of
that's it.
sports.
But yeah, I think my experience of sport growing up was very much a positive one, not just in terms of the physical health, but the life skills I gained from sport. You know, what it means to win, what it means to lose, what it means to sacrifice things, trying your best, all those really key life skills and lessons it gives you, but also what it did for my mental health and well-being. And that certainly was a central factor and passion in setting up Sport for Life.
And then once you've obviously gone on the trip, was that before uni or after? Did you say?
Yeah, before.
Before, so you come back and kind of gone straight into university. What did you study when you came back?
Yeah, so I went to Leeds Uni, did sport and exercise science and physiology, so a science degree, BSc. Obviously, there's a bit of a sport theme there, quite different to what I ended up doing. Obviously, there is that theme and commonality of sport being there, but yeah, quite different. But loved those
So you
few
didn't
years.
set out. You didn't go to university setting out for a kind of career in the third sector. What was your what was your aspiration? A lot of young people going to uni and sports science degrees. What was your kind of to get into pro sport, elite level sports?
I had no idea. Probably wasn't good enough to make elite sport. I was probably honest enough on that. Yeah, I had no preferences really, and I don't think I was too hard.
Not from the science side, like looking at an analyst or sports scientist in those elite.
Not really, no. I was fairly flexible, fairly open. Didn't put any pressure on myself to try and decide too early what I wanted to do. There was no family pressure, nothing like that. But just really enjoyed those 3 years. Made some friendships for life there. But yeah, it was when I was kind of finishing the end of university. That's when I probably started to think about what are my key passions here and what do I want to do, and something a little bit different to what a lot of my friends were doing, the more kind of linear graduate job process. And I really thought about my key passions, and sport was central to it. Birmingham was central to it. You know, born and bred, massive passion for the area, passion for young people. From my experience at Brazil, a bit of other work I'd done, holiday camps and the summer before we started Sport for Life. And it was, you know, those three key passions for young people, Birmingham and sport, and the power of sport that led me to start the organisation.
And so this is so you graduated, is it around 2005, 2006 time?
Yeah, 6, 7, yeah.
6, 7. So I guess nowadays it's quite common or popular, trendy, I guess, to be entrepreneurial, to start, it's quite pushed quite a lot. And obviously you did start a charity, but for me it's the same thing as taking that leap to start your own organisation business. Is that something that you kind of, I guess, had nurtured with you growing up? Was it like something from close family, friends, any mentors that you thought that had kind of given you that bug to start something for yourself?
Good question. Not really, if I'm perfectly honest. I think, you know, looking back, you know, it's 15, 16 years ago now, really naive, really young, definitely interested in sport and those key passions. But I wouldn't say, you know, kind of entrepreneurship or social entrepreneurship was high on the agenda. Of course it is now, but yeah, a bit more naive, didn't know the sector, didn't know business, didn't know how to run an organization. So it was very much in the deep end without that experience, without those skills. But I think
that's the best way to learn, isn't it? I think.
Yeah, sometimes, yeah.
If you'd have known what it'd take to launch it, you might have had second thoughts back then if someone had told you exactly what it's going to take.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I think we spoke about last time how when we started it, I was doing some of the sports coaching, but it didn't take long before I realized that's probably not where my skill set is. And I'd seen others who were much more embedded in their local communities, that were much better at engaging with young people, that were better positive role models. And I knew quite quickly I wanted to grow this and get others to deliver these programs or deliver the sport than myself. And I think I quickly realized the best way I can add value, the best way I can support the organization is by supporting those people, creating the right environment and culture to support people who are better at working with young people. Didn't diminish that passion at all, but I just realized others are going to be better placed to do that. And so a lot of my energy went into income generation, strategy. How are we growing this? How are we supporting the team to be as best equipped as they possibly can be?
Yeah, I mean, that's quite a forward-thinking mindset. You see a lot of people who maybe just get their head down and get working and be delivering all the sessions themselves, and then realise that I can't grow this because I'm fully embedded in the delivery. What was, I guess, starting out launching 2006, 2007, I know we're going to talk about, you had quite a big shift in terms of your delivery model, but at that point when you started, did you have, how did you get off the ground? So did you, obviously being a charity, you need to have that kind of governance in place and kind of bring a lot of people together to create a board structure. How was that difficult at the time? Obviously being what would it be, 21-year-old, 22-year-old?
Yeah, and I'll be honest, can't entirely remember absolutely everything, given it's been quite a number of years. But yeah, I think, of course, there needed to be a strong focus on good governance initially. So getting our policies in place, ensuring we were safe and secure, and safeguarding was high on the agenda. Getting a board in place, it is quite challenging in the first 12 to 24 months because a lot of funders, a lot of commissioners, they want to see that track record. They want to see 12 months or 2 years worth of accounts. So that was difficult. I think a lot of effort went into income generation and fundraising, because if we wanted to grow this thing and employ other people, let alone ourselves, that had to be central to our approach. So it was much more sport for sport's sake. For the first few years, I know we spoke about that last time, the key was participation. And so our funding was very much sport specific. And, we engaged with Football Foundation, Sport England, the FA, those kind of funders. But I think, in answer to your question, it was a big focus on governance to make sure we're secure and safe, and income generation, and then use that as a springboard to grow.
And so back then, like you said, sport for sport's sake, you were out there, I guess your program out there was kind of delivering like kind of sports development types, so delivering in the community. Was it all, and you mentioned a couple of funders there, was it predominantly football or multi-sports kind of community-based activities?
Yeah, it was probably a bit more of a traditional sports offer compared to what we are today, where it's much more around physical activity and being really flexible and youth-led with what young people want. It was, more traditional, more kind of team-based, focused on participation. Football was huge. I remember one of our first big wins was a large grant from the Football Foundation, and that was 4 different areas in Birmingham, football focused. And that was the basis on which we delivered and grew, very much using sport as a vehicle, outputs as opposed to outcomes like we are today, bums on seats, participation focus. But as you said, we went through quite a big strategic change in 2010, changed the way in which we use sport. Sport became just the conduit, the vehicle, the tool to go on to achieve something much more tangible. And that was kind of twofold, really. One was from a funding perspective and our funding strategy. We wanted to engage non-sports funders, and the door was closed to them. Lottery, Children Need, Common Relief, other big funders. We knew we had to use sport to achieve non-sports outcomes. And the other reason, more importantly, was consultation with hundreds of young people from inner city Birmingham. They were saying, it's great that we're playing sport. They might not have articulated it like this, but they were effectively saying we're just scratching the surface by participation. We've got lots of issues, lots of challenges. Youth unemployment's really high in Birmingham, got crime and social behavioural issues, educational attainment challenges. So they wanted more support, and we had to respond to that. And so we really started that process of changing our model in 2010.
Well, and I guess as you're delivering that, even though, like you said, it was that kind of traditional sports offer, I know your guys that were out there delivering the programs and yourself, they're going to be developing relationships with the young people, and they're probably going to get referrals or inbound inquiries, or whether it be whether it's cause concern, whatever it be. So I guess, did you see it from the grassroots up as well, rather than like looking at the funders' objectives as well? You probably were hearing this day in, day out in terms of, how do I do this? I need to get a job. This is happening at home, whatever it be.
Absolutely, yeah. We were really embedded in those local communities, and we wanted to have really positive relationship with our young people. They can be honest and open and transparent with us, and our staff were an incredible asset with that. They were amazing at engaging with young people, being a real positive role model, and we were getting that feedback and we wanted to respond to it. I think looking back, it was more anecdotal. We knew we were changing lives, but actually we weren't really evidencing that. And our impact journey since then has been really exciting and really interesting. And M&E is really important. Being data led and having validated and reliable outcomes is a really cool journey we've been on. That's born from wanting to really understand the difference we're making, and knowing we're making the difference and what works and what doesn't work, and being guided by that data and that insight. And of course, being able to evidence that change is really important. So we can go back to funders and commissioners, really show the difference we're making, and hopefully draw down more funding and ultimately grow what we do and work with more young people, which is part of our mission and purpose.
It's interesting, like you're saying about being data-led and kind of looking at the insights. Is there, I don't know if one comes to mind, but where an example of maybe a project or piece of work you've done where it wasn't successful, even though you might have, like on the surface or in another, if you looked at it in another perspective, it would have been, someone might have deemed it successful, but then when you really dig into those insights, you kind of think didn't really hit the mark, or there's more work to do there. I don't know if there was any.
Yeah, good question. Yeah, a couple of things spring to mind. I mean, since 2010 to today, in those kind of 12 years, we've iterated our model loads of times, and that's been based on insights, what works, what doesn't work. And one of the shifts was a shift away from a one-size-fits-all project-based approach to a much more youth-led, flexible model like the one we have today. And what didn't work was in the one-size-fits-all, we were giving a lot of the same activities and services to young people, regardless of whether they needed it or not. So we might have had a classroom of a group of neat young people we were working with, just as an example. There might be 20 people, 15 people, but there'd be varying needs within that. There'd be some that are long-term needs, some that are a bit closer to the job market, slightly different challenges and barriers, but actually they were all getting mentoring, which is one of our core services. They were all getting a QCF level 1 or level 2 qualification in sports leaders, where we're an accredited assessment center. They're all getting a mock interview, and it was very rigid. And actually, the reality is some of those young people, yeah, they needed a bit of mentoring, and they needed some sport to really help with their mental health and life skills. But then they were in a place where they could get work, but we were still giving them a mock interview or a social action project, whatever it is. And so there's probably a bit of waste there and a bit of inefficiency. And that's what the data and feedback told us. We therefore changed the model, as I said. And then another real quick example is almost like a bit of a control group. We had different groups and we delivered a different qualification to one compared to the other, and we assessed the differences, and that led to a slight change in our qualifications offer. So it's a journey we're still on, but yeah, being led by the insights is really important.
Yeah, I love that. That's the real technical approach. We do A/B testing here at Coordinate Sports, so testing new features and putting two versions of the same thing out. So it resonates with me, that one. You mentioned it a couple of times there around the models. Probably a good time for us to talk about how things look now. So you pivoted away from the kind of classic sports offer, and you've got obviously a lot more impact, and you're focusing more on, I guess, life outcomes, lifestyle outcomes and stuff like that at the moment. So yeah, what does it look like from a model offer now?
Yeah, really quickly, our model is in three parts. We've got recruitment, engagement, and progression. Recruitment is where do we get young people from? And that's primarily referral based. So we've got a lot of referral partnerships. Youth offending team, West Midlands Police, job centres, probably the biggest referrer that young people can self-refer as well. Lots of partnerships there. We use sport itself to engage young people and act as a bit of a hook before they do something more tangible. Digital recruitment, community outreach, lots of kind of ways of engaging young people. Then we'll do quite a structured intake assessment. So we really want to understand what are your challenges, what are your barriers, where are you now, and what are your aspirations for the future. That really helps us to know what we're going to do with them. And there's a bit of an eligibility there as well. So we work with 11 to 29-year-olds. With 11 to 18s, they're still in education, but they've got to be FSM eligible. If they're 18 to 29 or 16 to 29, depending on their situation, they're going to be NEET, not an employment, educational training. They're going to live in the West Midlands as well. On some occasions, if their needs are quite clinical or we can't support them, we will refer them elsewhere. We still have a duty of care to do that, but we will work with most young people that come to us. And our model is quite intense. It's up to 12 months, and we work with around 1,500 to 2,000 young people each year. Then on to engagement. That's very much what we do with young people. Our core service is mentoring, so one-to-one mentoring. We've got a number of full-time employability mentors who support young people in their journey through us. They're that kind of one constant that young people get. They act as a positive role model. They create an action plan for them. They start to really look at their CV, cover letters, look at employability skills, key life skills, and they each have a caseload of young people that they're working with. Then we have our training services, which they can refer young people onto on a needs-led basis, and that's our group-based work, like accredited qualifications. We deliver functional skills up to level 2, maths and English. We do employer encounters, so encounters of the workplace. So that might be workshops, it might be mock interviews. We've got some sector-specific partnerships where young people can get into construction or digital or whatever it might be. We also do social action projects. We work on the NCS program, and they continue sport as well. So that sport is really designed to improve physical and mental well-being, but also drive through some key life skills. jobs. And ultimately, that leads us on to the last part. It's that combination of mentoring and training that supports young people towards a positive future. It's all about getting them towards something positive in the future. And that is tangible outcomes in employment, educational training, transforming life skills, improving mental health and well-being, improving physical health and reducing crime.
So that mentorship is kind of bringing, I guess, as you're talking now, I'm thinking, it's a great opportunity so you're taking young people and moving them closer to the job market as much as you can. And then as you see those gaps, you can refer in internally to the training team and
Exactly.
get them fill out the CV. It almost feels a little bit like, I guess, like maybe comparing two things that are the same, but like the American Big Brother program, that type of stuff, to have someone there with you who get that support. Yeah. How long do the mentors kind of work with the young people? Is it like a long period of time or intensive?
Yeah, in total, it's up to 12 months, but it varies depending on their needs. They might be checking in and meeting and supporting them weekly, or it might be monthly. It really depends on their situation, the support they need. We're quite youth-led on that. Obviously, we try and guide them and provide the support we feel is needed and necessary, but it's very much guided by the young person.
And I know now scale, you've expanded rapidly. I know you're still kind of predominantly West Mids focused, but over the next few years, you've got plans to expand. And I know it's difficult. I suppose it's difficult because you've got such a good connection with the local area. To replicate it might be a bit difficult from a central.
Yeah, you're right. So we've grown quite a bit in 15 years. I mean, it hasn't felt like it's been aggressive growth, and we're not compromising any of our values when we do that. But it has been incremental for sure, and especially over the last few years. So we're now in a position, as I said, we're supporting around 2,000 young people each year. We have about 27 full-time staff for about 1.5 million turnover this year. And yeah, we kind of have a couple of approaches to our growth strategy. So we do want to grow more within the West Midlands, that's for sure. We're still 90% of what we do is in Birmingham, but we've got key delivery areas in Sandwell, a little bit in Coventry, Walsall. We recognise the need there. We recognise there's an increased demand for what we do. I think what's really important in our approach is that we don't want to step on anyone's toes. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. And so we really want to articulate what our added value is. And as we grow, there's times when we're working much more in partnership and maybe less in a kind of direct delivery approach with some more hyper-local community sports organizations that are amazing at engaging young people, that know their communities, that are embedded in their communities more than we are. But actually we could add value through mentoring, through delivering accredited qualifications, through impact management support, through funding. So there's some quite exciting models about where we're going to grow. To date, it's all been as a direct deliverer. And then I think much more long term, we do have ambitions to be national, but we're definitely going to take a slow, patient, one step at a time approach as we do that. And the current focus is the West Midlands.
Yeah, definitely. I think like you touched on it there in terms of those hyper-local organisations and partnering with them. So I guess that's always the danger of kind of, parachuting in with your ideas of how things should be done. And it doesn't always work like that. Every community is different, I suppose. So for sure, what's your, your day-to-day challenges you're finding now? Obviously leading the business, I guess it's changing all the time as it's growing, but what's the main thing that kind of keeps flagging, keeps you up at night maybe? What's the biggest one?
Well, it used to be my kids that kept me up at night, but thankfully they're a bit older now, so that's good.
Nice. Yeah, it does get better,
Yeah, I think, in terms of challenges, there's lots of challenges. I think change can be painful and growth can be a challenge. I think sustaining that growth is an ongoing challenge. We've gone from nothing in 2006-07 to where we are today. And each year that probably gets a little bit harder to sustain that growth. But, we're in a good position where we've got key resource and some key experts and really talented teams that can help us with that. I think there's certainly a challenge in the wider team's kind of approach to change. Change can be difficult, and we're really values led, and we really want to embrace and advocate a growth mindset where, talent is just the starting point. It's not binary. There's always a continual learning journey and evolution. We want our team to really embrace feedback as part of that. I've failed lots of times in those 15, 16 years, and that's okay. And we don't want to stigmatize failure. It's how we learn. And
I had one I was going to ask you, but I think it's probably different. Is it, like you said, you're working with 2,000 young people now, but you're probably looking at the environment and the landscape thinking probably another 10,000, 20,000 young people we could be engaging with. So I guess that's a challenge to know that there's more you could do, but you can't, not getting ahead of yourself kind of thing.
Yeah, of course, yeah, and we can only do what we can with what we have at any point in time. But you're right. That's almost a motivator to continue to grow. We know there's an increased demand for our services. We know we want to work with more young people, but I think we are constantly thinking about where we're best placed to add value. As I said, we want to continue to be a direct deliverer in some of the areas where we're really embedded. But as we grow into new areas, it's a case of not treading on toes, just really adding value to other organizations where we can. But I think another kind of just a couple of other challenges is getting that balance often in the team of that kind of support versus performance. We massively believe and prioritize supporting our staff. We know everyone's here because they're purpose driven and they align to our values and they want to change the lives of lots of young people. And well-being is massively central to the way we do business and the way we work with our team. But equally, performance is really important. Some of our funders and commissioners is quite demanding. We do have specific outcomes and KPIs we've got to work towards. And we know high performance is a combination and a synthesis of support and challenge. And so that challenge really needs to be there. And then I think just lastly, I suppose, a bit of a personal perspective over the 15 years is a challenge has been that journey of self-awareness. That's been really important. I think self-awareness is a precursor to emotional intelligence. If I want to understand others and help others and empower others, I need to understand myself and those really important behaviors as we and I lead others, knowing I'm not perfect, being open to feedback, constantly reflecting, how can I be better? How can we be better? What can I do differently? What can I learn each week, each year? So they're the key challenges, but they're opportunities as well.
Yeah, no, I resonate with that one, understanding ourselves. So they said, why am I flying off the handle today? Trying to work it out and understand the underlying causes. You mentioned there around, I guess, your funders and they maybe quite demanding in terms of what you need to deliver for them. How is the organisation funded then? Is it all kind of grant, or do you have any kind of revenue, obviously revenue generating things you charge? Is it all kind of fully funded?
Yeah, so we're about 60% of our income is grants, trusts and foundations. So some of the kind of usual suspects, lottery, children need common relief, some bigger trusts and foundations, some local, some regional, some national. And there's quite a bit of diversity within that. And then about 30% is more commissioned work. So on a contract basis, might be a welfare to work contracts. We work on the NCS, National Citizen Service Programme, which is a government contract, working under a prime on that. And then 10%, if my maths is correct, is kind of other. That might be a bit of corporate support, might be donations, things like that. So it's fairly mixed, but there's definitely a reliance on grants, trusts and foundations currently. But
yeah, for sure. So no kind of paid for services from the actual end user. It's all kind of funded for them. Yeah.
It's always free for our beneficiaries and always will be.
Fantastic. I know it's got to be difficult in the climate to be always kind of juggling that funding merry-go-round, I guess. Hopefully you've got some of those contracts longer than a year and doesn't have to be chased all the time.
Yeah, it's quite typical of a lot of social businesses, social enterprises, charities. We operate on a deficit model. Yes, we have reserves and a structured reserves policy, but each year we're working on that deficit. We've got to go out to really hit those targets. But we've got some really, really good people in the team that support us in that. I'm still passionate about that area, still really enjoy it. So it is a challenge each year, a growing challenge, but one that we do try to rise to.
Okay. And then I guess I always tend to ask this when I see people doing really, I guess, impactful work, especially yours spanning from the kind of the age range you work with. Have you got any examples, or I'm sure you have got loads over the years, but examples of someone who's kind of come into the program, used all of the services and come out the other end, maybe even working with you now?
Yeah, there's always one that comes to mind. There's a young guy who we engaged a number of years ago as a beneficiary on one of our programs, and they went on to progress into volunteering with ourselves as a kind of exit route and outcome from the program. They then went on to be a sessional staff in our sessional staff team that was supporting other young people. So it was that really nice kind of alumni type model, and they could use their experiences and what they've done at Sport for Life to give back. They then went on to be a part-time member of staff and then a full-time member of staff. So it was a lovely journey. Not every young person goes through that, but that's probably the one that comes to mind.
Stands out. Yeah, that sounds amazing. In terms of like marketing and communication, we have this sometimes in terms of obviously Sport for Life branding, where giving you time to tell the story and explain exactly what you do. Do you sometimes have maybe any challenges in terms of articulating that quickly in marketing? So, example, if someone sees a poster or sees a logo, or someone gets exactly what you do straight away, I guess that can be challenging in terms of just explaining what the sports delivery sector is, as opposed to sport and Premier League or whatever it is. Sometimes it might be a challenge. So how have you found that?
Yeah, it's always a challenge. And, it's like they say, you should be able to explain what you do to a 8-year-old for them to understand. I actually have the benefit of having an 8-year-old. So I have tried to explain what Sport for Life does to them with mixed success, to be honest. But yeah, I think it is challenging. And, a lot of people sometimes they see the name and they'll make an assumption that it is just sport. But I think there's an opportunity there to continue that conversation and really explain what we do. I think, we have 3 key audiences, really. We've got our young people, we've got our funders, and then we've got partners. And the way we speak to those different audiences is different. But I think, there are challenges sometimes to really explain how does sport fit into this. We almost are sport for sport's sake as well as sport for social change. We believe in power of sport as a tool, but also as a direct service and activity that we deliver. So I think, sometimes you do need to get out of the echo chamber and out of the sport for development sector language at times and just be able to really articulate what you do really simply to external audiences. And I think that's really important when you're trying to start corporate partnerships, other partnerships, speaking to different stakeholders. It's a challenge, but it's an opportunity as well.
Yeah, definitely opportunity to show that, like you said, with the being data driven like you are and having kind of all the evidence behind you, can say, look, we do focus on sport as the tool, conduit, like you say, but these are all the outcomes that we've achieved, all the impact. Just going to change lanes slightly, just talk a bit more about yourself in terms of kind of how I guess your leadership style, but more around maybe personally. Do you have any kind of habits or things you put in place to keep yourself on top form? I know obviously you look like a sportsman now looking at you. So do you keep active? Keep playing? You still actively?
Yeah.
Competing?
So I love still watching sport and participating in sport. Try and go to the gym, keep fit fairly often. Play football. I used to play a bit of tennis and playing a bit more golf now as I'm getting older. But yeah, I think family first, always really big on family, spending time with my kids. I don't want to contradict the culture that we've got at the organization, which is values led and well-being focused. And I buy into that as well. I don't want to be burning the midnight oil. I want to be spending time where I can with my family. At times that is difficult and there's certain pressures that make that a challenge, but I really want to have a good work-life balance. I think in terms of kind of mantras and things that I kind of go by in terms of leadership, I wouldn't say there's any that I live and die by, but I really believe in that notion of controlling what we can control. We can't control what happens, but we can control our response to what happens. Really like that. I think I really want to prioritize happiness. And I think that comes from meaning and purpose. And there's this kind of stoic principle of want what you already have and you'll always be happy. And that's around your expectations. I think that's really important. Got my personal values that I suppose leak into leadership around wanting to leave the world a better place, integrity, caring, compassion, want to create something of value. But we have a few kind of things internally as well around everyday school day. We want to always be learning. How can we be better? We've got this thing about focus where we want the most important thing is to keep the most important thing the most important thing. And I think as we've grown and developed, it's easy sometimes to get distracted, but we really need to be crystal clear on what is our purpose? What is it we're striving for this 90 days, this quarter? And what is our action plan for this year? That kind of golden thread is really important.
I love that, mate. Sorry, some gems that I've just been scribbling down here, getting a lot of value from that, and hopefully our listeners are too. In terms of yourself, we always do a reflective, and it sounds like you are a really reflective person. And obviously, looking at some of those, I guess those approaches, mental health, stress, managing that, it feels like it's maybe paramount to you personally, but as well as what you're doing in the organization is going to help out. We just have this reflective question we always ask at the end of every show, and it's just around advice for your younger self. So I know it might be around what we've been talking about already, but is there anything you'd go back and tell yourself when you were starting out, leaving university and going on this journey? What one piece of advice would you give yourself?
Yeah, I love this question because it's really reflective. And it's interesting because if we were to have this conversation in another 15 years' time, I'm sure I'd be saying something else. Yeah, I think it's difficult to focus on one thing, but just a few things that come to mind is just do your best. I think that's ultimately all we can ever do. And one person's best might be different to another person's best, but that's in our gift just to do the best that we can. Ties into that piece around control. We can't necessarily control the outcome of things. We can't control if we're going to get that contract. We can't control if we're going to get that job. We can't control if we win or if we lose. But what we can control is just doing our best. And it resonates really nicely with sport. If you're playing a game of football or a game of tennis, you can't control whether you're going to win. You can't control if you're going to beat the opponent, but all you can do is just do your best. I think, especially looking back, as really young when I started the organization, I would say be patient. Things take time. Your happiness is the most important thing. I think looking back at when I was 21, I feel like I'd want to say to myself, don't seek external validation or happiness from external things. Focus on purpose and meaning, what brings you joy, what makes a difference to you. And I think lastly is be curious. I love that. I love not knowing the answer sometimes and being curious and wanting to learn and wanting to understand more. I think, we live in this age where it's so partisan and so divided. You're either on this side or you're that. There's no shades of grey anymore. And I think not being dogmatic and really just seeking to understand is really important.
No, I love that, Tom. Again, probably for the second or third time. Thanks so much for coming on the show. Appreciate your time. Appreciate you giving up your time and being so transparent with us. So yeah, thanks so much, mate.
Pleasure. Loved it. Thanks for your time as well, James.
Thank you for listening to this week's show. You can subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can write to us at dryphase.podcast@coordinate.cloud, tweet us at coordinatesport, or follow us on Instagram at coordinate_sports, or on my account at James_ventures. This episode was produced by Nancy Kwamboka, with support from Claire Goodchild and Lola Small, with special thanks to Rochelle. I'm James Moore, and you've been listening to The Drive Phase from Coordinate Sport.